we're going to look at our first topic, which is theory of demand. This is a cardinal topic in economics that every economist must understand. So when we're discussing issues of demand, we must understand that demand in the context of economics is not just a desire or a want or a wish like others may think. In economics, demand is more than just a desire. We're looking at a desire which is backed by two important things: an ability to pay and the willingness to pay. So if you're demanding for a particular commodity or tuition, for instance, you must have the ability and you must be willing to pay for it. So that is what we call demand. Therefore, we can define demand as the consumer's willingness and ability to purchase at different prices during a period in time. And so when we're discussing theory of demand, we're going to look at the
I have a
following
question.
figures. So demand will be defined in terms of price, in terms of a given period. Also, demand will be defined in terms of the purchasing power that an individual may have in readiness to exchange the commodity for money. Now, there are a number of factors that affect demand. We call them determinants of demand. The determinants of demand will also give a relationship with the determinants of elasticity. So I would want us to be as practical as possible when we're dealing with economics, because it is a real life and everyday phenomenon. So what are some of the factors that affect one's demand? We have the price of that commodity. The price of the commodity, all things held constant, is one of the key aspects that is inversely related with demand. So the higher the price of a commodity, the lower the quantity demanded. The lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded of a particular commodity. So price is the first and most important factor that affects demand. The other factor that affects demand is the price of related goods. So we have what we call substitute goods and complementary goods. Can somebody help us understand these two? What are substitute goods and what are complementary goods? Okay, so when we're dealing with these related goods, they're what we call substitute goods. These are goods which can be used with equal ease in place of the other. They are perfect substitutes, can be substituted one for the other. For instance, if you have tea, can be substituted for coffee, Coca-Cola with Pepsi. So these basically have the same usage. So we also have complementary goods, which are goods that move hand in hand. Their utility is dependent on the availability of both goods together. For instance, a ball pen and ink, a phone and a SIM card. So these are called complementary goods. Now, between these two goods, we need to understand that the substitute goods have a positive relationship. They have a positive elasticity as well. So when we're doing computations, the positivity comes in the sense that whereas the price of one good goes up, the demand of the other good will go up. That's why we call it a positive relationship. So we can look at, for instance, can you give me two other examples of substitute goods that you know and how the positive relationship exists? Anyone? Let me give you one. For instance, we're looking at Sturcanico Cinema and Freshview. If the price of Sturcanico Cinema goes up, people will switch to Freshview. So this is a positive relationship. However, we must understand that this switch, because of the differences in price, is what we call the substitution effect. The substitution effect. So complementary goods also move hand in hand. They have a negative relationship. For instance, car and fuel. If fuel goes up, the demand for cars will go down as well, because both will go down. So we call that an inverse relationship. So the elasticity of demand for complementary goods is always negative. So we also have another factor that affects demand, which is called the income for consumers. So we have a direct relationship that exists.
Can't hear anything too.
I think we've lost our lecture. Maybe network problem.
Okay, so we're talking about another factor which is called the income for the consumers. So when your income goes up, ideally, you must demand more of a particular good. So we call this the income effect. However, this only applies for two kinds of goods, which we call necessities or luxurious goods. So if your income goes up, you demand more food, more clothing, more shelter. Even for comforts, you demand an air conditioner, a fancy car. This is called a direct relationship. Now, income also has an inverse relationship for what we call inferior goods. The inferior goods are goods which we demand less of if our income goes up, not because we can't afford them, but we can afford better. So in the context, I could simply give an example of second-hand clothes. Should your income go up, you will not go to Salaula, you'd rather buy designer clothes. So the Salaula clothes or second-hand clothes become inferior goods. And so elasticity of income, if it's positive, we know that those are normal goods. So the necessities and the comforts are called normal goods. The inferior goods, these ones have a negative relationship, and therefore the elasticity of income is negative. There are other factors that affect your demand, like taste and preferences. So generally, over time, we know that fashion habits will change. And so the demand will bear a direct relationship with these determinants. So as the modern world evolves, people will buy modified or high quality goods. For instance, we're evolving from a Pentium to Core I series. Okay, so people are now buying with fashion and tastes. So under tastes, we have some effects that you would be interested to understand. There are effects like the bandwagon effect, the effects like the Veblen effect. These are effects that come about because of the following. So when somebody demands goods just because others have it, we call it the bandwagon or demonstration effect. It means individuals who only demand a particular good because of others. So we also have an effect which we call a snob effect. Snob effect is a good which loses its prestige when it becomes what? Commonly used. You don't want to wear the same t-shirt as that one. So a good loses its prestige when it is common. So there are goods that have prestige. We call them prestige goods like diamond, fancy cars. But when they lose their prestige, we call that the snob effect. We also have the Veblen effect, which seeks status, like the iPhones. So people will buy them because it's only attached to people who are affluent. So we call that the Veblen effect. So these tests that we're talking about can be influenced by internal and external effects. But however, we need to understand that this is a key factor that affects the demand for particular goods. Are we following? We also have other factors like population size and composition. A huge population will be backed by huge demand. And also, we need to understand that the composition of the population is also vital. If we have the young, the babies, there's a kind of goods that they'll demand. We also have the level of income that will affect demand. It's different from the income we're talking about. So here we're going to look at the distribution of income or wealth in the country. So we discover that certain areas are known to have low income earners. So demand for particular goods will not go. So you need to be very, very careful when you are trying to ascertain the demand for a particular good. Other factors will be social, logical factors, which look at the family background, their culture, marital status. Certain goods will not sell for them. Weather conditions also obvious for certain kinds of goods. For instance, ice cream will go so high in the hot season. Swimming pools will do well when it's very hot. So weather, umbrellas, etc. So advertisement is also another key factor that affects demand. And so you must make a clever campaign when you're creating an advertising, when you're advertising a particular goods. We also have government policy, which also is very cardinal. Sometimes government will come in to lift taxation on certain particular goods. Remember when we had load shedding, government had to remove all manner of taxes so to encourage alternative sources of what? Alternative sources of power. Then we also have expectations. These are also very vital in the sense that when we have an expectation that the prices will go up, people will tend to buy speculatively. For instance, if the fuel is about to go up, what happens? People will do what? Will buy more fuel. All together so far?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
So the other factors that affect demand will be the trade conditions. For instance, countries in SADC have given their own preferences. If you're within SADC, you don't pay a certain kind of tax, or you don't pay certain, then also the credit facilities, after sales services. If this company, when you're going for a haircut, they would put some shampoo, but also the credit facilities that are given there. If you buy from this store, you're going to be given a certain reduction. So those ones also affect what? The demand. Therefore, demand is given by demand schedule in terms of the following: dx, which stands for the independent variable, and the functions are dependent variables. So this is what we call demand schedule. So the factors that affect dx, the price of good x, the income, which is m. Income is also denoted by y and I. It's also income. PS is the price of the substitute. PC, the complementary. T is test. A, advertisements, etc. So this is what we call the demand schedule. So the law of demand in this respect simply states that people will buy more at lower prices and buy less at higher prices, holding all things the same. This is according to Samuelson. So it is assumed that price is the only variable factor that will only allow movement along the demand curve. Otherwise, the other factors will cause a shift in the demand curve. So if that is understood, I will do a quick can you remember. So graphically, you must understand that demand is downslope. Now we need to understand that economics is predominantly about graphs. You need to understand the flow of the graphs. So demand is given by A minus BQ. The gradient is always negative because of the inverse relationship. So demand, price goes up from P1 to P2. Quantity demanded will go down from Q1 to Q2. So this is how demand is. So demand is opposite with supply. For supply, for goods, the price, if the price goes up from P1 to P2, the quantity supplied will also go up. So suppliers are more willing to supply more at a very good price. So we must understand that these two inversely, supply is directly related and demand is inversely related. So the elasticity for supply is always positive, whereas the elasticity of demand is always negative because of what I have just explained. Okay. Now, supply also has its factors. So we need to understand the determinants of supply and also factor in the law of supply. So what are some of the factors that affect supply and how do we define supply? So we can say the following. Start with supply refers to the quantity of goods and services that producers are willing and able to offer at various prices during a specific period. And so it represents a positive relationship between price and quantity that producers are willing to sell. So there are several factors that affect supply. Number one, the resource prices, the cost of the inputs, such as materials, labor, and capital. Number two, the technology. Technological advancements can also enhance productivity, thereby allowing producers to increase at a higher output, but using the same resources. So technology is another key factor. Other factors that affect supply are taxes, subsidies. When taxes are imposed on the producers, they increase their production costs. Okay. When they reduce the taxes, they'll be willing to supply more at a lower price. So subsidies also come in when government decides to lower production by reducing or adding incentives to increase supply. The other factors that affect supply are government regulations. These are policies that are implemented by government to impact supply. For instance, in a strict environmental restriction, they may require additional investment to meet compliance with the standards, leading to reduced supply. In other hands, the regulation of certain potentially policies to stimulate supply by removing barriers to entry, and what I explained when we had our load shedding, government has to intelligently reduce the cost of bringing products that would help government reduce the scourge that we had in the power supply. There are several other factors that will affect supply. Some of them include expectations of future prices. If producers anticipate prices will go up, they may reduce the current supply in order to sell at a higher price. So when the farmers know that maize will fetch high in December, they would rather keep it until they sell it at a higher price. The number of suppliers also may affect the total supply that we may have in the country. So if you have a number of firms that are producing and supplying, it will result in a huge supply over a total. Other factors that affect supply are the weather and natural disasters. So during the rainy season, we know there's huge supply. Droughts and floods will disrupt supply, and that's where DMU comes in. Prices of related goods. So if the prices of substitutes and complementary goods are analyzed, we realize that substitutes goods may motivate customer to switch to other more profitable alternatives. So if you hear that bread has become expensive, farmers will do candle so that more people will switch their supply. So also, when you are going to analyze complementary goods, it may also be an incentive to vitalize producers. So if you hear that milk has become cheap, you would go into cereals. Or if you hear that one particular commodity has become cheap, if you're a complementing factor, you come in. So we know how that Unilas has become a complement to boarding houses around there. So wherever Unilas is building, more people are able to forego their housing just to complement as students are coming there. So these are factors that can interact with supply. Now, supply is upsloping. Demand is what? Downsloping. These two will unite at a point called equilibrium. Equilibrium is simply the point at which demand is equal to supply. So we call this equilibrium. This is called the consumer surplus, and this is called the producer surplus. So if we're going to do this, this is 3, 8, 28, 0, and 10. So the area of a triangle is given by half pH. So consumer surplus, we're going to calculate the triangle there. The base is 10, height is 20. We subtract 28 minus 8 is 20. So half times base, which is 10, times height, which is 20. We're going to get what? 200 divided by 2, which is 100. This is called the what? Consumer surplus. The producer surplus is also the one which is down there. The base is still 10, and the height from here to here is 5. Half times base, which is 10, times height, which is 5. So 50 divided by 2 is going to be what? 25. It's called the producer surplus. When you add these two, we're going to get 125. This is called the total surplus or the social welfare. Are we following? Are we together? So
Yes.
we may be given equations. 100 minus 2q here. Price is given by 10 plus 3q. So which one is demand? The one with the negative. Which one is supply? The one with the positive. So how do we sketch graphs? Let me teach you how to sketch graphs. So if you have an equation like 100 minus 3q, you put the letters on one side. So P plus 3q is equal to what? 100. So you identify the intercepts. So what number is before P? 1. 1 into 100 is 100. For the 3 into 100 is 33.33. So our P is always here, and our Q is there. So it's cutting the P at what? 100. The Q at what? 33.33. This is 0. Suppose we had a supply function, which is 10 plus 2q. Put the letters on one side, P minus 2q. When the Q crosses, it becomes a negative. What number is before P? 1. 1 into 10 is 10. What number is before 2? Negative 2. Negative 2 into 10 is what? Negative 5. So the P will cut at 10, and the Q will cut at negative 5. So this is our P and this is our Q. If we're going to join these two curves, we are going to, so demand is there, supply is there. So demand is cutting at 100, supply is starting from 10. We don't need the negative 5 because our what is always, quantity is always what? Positive. Now we need to calculate our equilibrium price and quantity. So at least we know that our graph here is going to cut from there, and this one cut from there. This is 100, and this is what? 10. So we're going to write this up. So demand is equal to supply. What is our demand? 100 minus 2Q. Then our supply is 10 plus 3Q. So here we're going to have 100. Let's subtract the 10. You're going to have 3Q. Add this when it goes inside, it will add. So this is 90, and this is 50. Not 55Q. So to solve for Q, we divide both sides by what? By 5. So our equilibrium quantity will therefore be 18. So where there is Q, we're going to put 18. Are you following? So since Q is 18, we can put it at any of these ones. This is equilibrium. So P is equal to 10 plus 3Q. Our Q is 18. 18 times 3 is 54. 54 plus 10 is 64. So meaning this is 64. Suppose we put it on the demand function. Are we going to get the same? Let's try it. So where there is a Q, put 18. So this is 100 minus 36. We should get 64. It's the same answer. All right. So now we have our price and quantity. Am I a little fast or we're following?
We are following.
We're following.
All right. So now we're able to identify of the two areas, A and B, which one is a consumer surplus and which one is a producer surplus? Well, the distance from here to here is 36. The distance from here to here is 18. So this is called our consumer surplus. So we're going to have half pH. Our base is what? 18. And our height is what? 36. So this is 36. From here to here is 54. So we can also calculate the, it's 18 and 54. This is called the producer surplus, and this is called the consumer surplus. So half base, which is 18, times height, which is what? 54. So we can calculate for each of these ones, and we add the two to get what we call the total surplus. Are we together?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So now this takes us to elasticity and the factors that affect it. So what is elasticity? Elasticity is a very key topic in economics and requires all of us to understand it fully. So you can define elasticity as follows. So elasticity refers to the responsiveness or sensitivity of quantity demanded of a good or a service due to changes in its price, income, or other factors. So it helps us to measure the degree of responsiveness and gives insight into the behavior of consumers and producers in response to the changes in the various variables. So there are various types of elasticity. We have price elasticity of demand. We have price elasticity of supply, income elasticity of demand, cost price elasticity of demand. Each of these ones focuses on the factors that affect the market dynamics that we're talking about. So the determinants of elasticity will determined by the type of elasticity being considered. For instance, there's what we call the price elasticity of demand. The price elasticity of demand really looks at a percentage change in quantity over percentage change in price. Percentage change in quantity. So price elasticity of demand will look at the availability of close substitutes. So consumers are more likely to switch to other commodities when the prices are very elastic, they are very close. Okay. So we have what we call price elasticity of demand. We have cross price elasticity, income elasticity. We also have advertising elasticity, the main types of elasticity, but for the sake of the course, we're going to dominate on these four. Start with price elasticity of demand and the computation that is there. So, like I mentioned, this is the type of elasticity which measures the responsiveness of what? Of the quantity demanded of a good due to changes in its price. It is given by the following formulas. So elasticity of demand simply percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price. Or you can say Q2 minus Q1 over Q1 divided by P2 minus P1 over P1. This is called our elasticity of what? Demand. Elasticity of demand, if you're using calculus, can be 1 over B times price over quantity, or direct demand function will be B times price over quantity. The elasticity of demand is always negative. If you have a number below between 0 and 1, we say that is inelastic. Exactly 1, it is unit elastic. If it's more than 1, it is elastic, according to the absolute values. So when we get elasticity which is less than 1, it's inelastic. When we look at what is equal to 1, it is unit elastic. When it's looking at what is more than 1, it is elastic. So we're going to use a function, for instance, demand function is equal to 10 minus 2Q. We are told that Q is equal to what? Maybe 2. What is P? When you put our Q there, it'll be 10 minus what? 2Q. So where there's Q, put a 2. So this is 10 minus 4. I'm going to get a 6. So here, this is called our inverse demand. When P is substituted from a equate an inverse demand. The gradient here is negative 2 because we know that demand is given by what? A minus BQ. So these two here, which comes before the letter, is our B. So using the inverse demand, elasticity of demand is equal to what? 1 over B times price over quantity. And since our B is what? Negative 2, the price we have there is what? calculated is 6, and the quantity we're given as 2. So this is 6 over -4. So what we get? 3 over 2, which is -1.5. So our comment in this case is demand is elastic. Elastic, because it's more than 1. So we only use this formula when we're dealing with the inverse demand function. Inverse means when P is subject to a formula. Suppose the same function, we're given Q as subject to a formula, which is 10 minus what? 2P. And we're told that P, for instance, is 4. When you put 4 there, our Q therefore would what? 10 minus 2, and here we put a 4 there. So 10 minus 8, we're going to get a 2. So using the direct demand function, our formula for the elasticity of demand is direct B as price over quantity. So what is our B here? Our B is -2. So here we're going to get -2, and the price of what? 4 over the quantity of what? 2. Can put the 1 there. So this is -8 over 42, we get -4. So demand there is elastic. Are we following? Are we together?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So we go to another type of elasticity, which we call income elasticity of demand. Income elasticity of demand is simply the responsiveness of quantity demanded of a service or a good due to the changes in the consumer's income. So this is given by elasticity of demand is equal to percentage change in what? Income over percentage change in quantity. So percent change in quantity over percentage change in income. Or Q2 minus Q1 over Q1 divided by Y2 minus Y1 over Y1. So here we mentioned that income effect occurs as follows. If we get a positive answer, it means that this is a normal good. If we get a negative answer, it means that this is what? An inferior good. So inferior good occurs when we have a negative elasticity. When we get a positive elasticity of income, we say that is a what? A normal good. All right. So income elasticity is very important because it's also able to tell us the nature of a good we are dealing in question. We also have what we call cross price elasticity of demand. We also have what we call cross price elasticity of demand. This is simply the demand that occurs due to changes in prices of another good. Cross price elasticity of demand is the responsiveness of quantity demanded of one good in the price of the other. It is also calculated as a percentage change in quantity of good X over percentage change in price of good Y. So this is elasticity cross price. So if you get a positive answer, it means that this is what? A substitute good. If we get a negative answer, this means that it is what? It is a complementary good. So we would have an equation which is good X as 2 minus 3py, 12 minus 3py, px plus 4py plus 10m we are told that the price of good X is what? 2 quart. Price of good Y is 3 quart. The income is 5 quart. Explain the elasticities. So firstly, you need to find the quantities there. We substitute them. So where there is 2 quarter, we put the, where there is price of X, we put a 2 quarter. Where there is price of Y, we put a 3 quarter. Where there is income, we put a 5 quarter. So this is going to give us 12 minus 6 plus 12 plus 50. Okay. So when we total up, we're going to get 68. So what is the price X, elasticity of X against X? This is called on price elasticity of demand. It is into the gradient times the price of X over quantity of X. So the gradient for good X is -3. Put the -3 there. The price of good X we have, which is a 2 there, and the quantity of good X we've calculated is a 68. So when you divide -6 over 68, what do you get? 6 over 68, we get -0.088. So since it's less than 1, it is called inelastic. Then we go elasticity, good X to Y. I mean, we get the gradient for good Y, the price for good Y, but the quantity for good X. So all these are gradients here. This is gradient for what? Good X, which is 3, negative. This is gradient for good Y, which is what? 4, positive. And it's a gradient for the income, which is 10. So you can tell even from this equation that if the signs are not the same, this is negative and this is positive, these are competing against each other. These are substitute goods. If there's negative and negative, they're complementing each other. So this would be a what? A complementary good. But also we know that substitute goods always have a positive elasticity, and complementary goods always have a negative elasticity of demand. So these are what I taught in the preamble. The income elasticity, the positive, it is a normal good. Income elasticity, if it's a negative, it is an inferior good. So these are important notes to take. So here we're going to put the gradient for good Y is what? Positive 4. And our price for good Y here is what? 3 over 68. So here we're going to have 12 over 68. Already we are going to get a positive answer. So we're going to simply conclude that this is a what? A substitute good. You don't say elastic or inelastic. You only say substitute or inferior substitute or complementary good. And finally, we explain the income elasticity. So the gradient for income was what? 10. And the price for income, we had a 5 over 68. So we multiply 10 times 5 is 50. 1 times 68, 68. So if we divide 50 divided by 68, we're going to get a positive 0. What? 0.735. So this is a normal good. All right. Let's do a quick can you remember? Then we can end our class. So question number 1. If your price elasticity of demand gives you a figure like negative 1.2, what would your comment be?
That it's inelastic.
Is what? Inelastic? Elastic?
Yes.
Elastic.
Elastic.
It is elastic, correct? Not inelastic. How about if your elasticity of demand was negative 0.2?
Inelastic.
Elastic, correct. Why is the axis of demand always negative? Because demand is inversely related to the quantity demanded. So if you have a cross price elasticity of negative 1.2, what would your comment be? If your cross price elasticity of is a positive 1.2, what would your comment be? Here we say it's a complementary good because all complementary have a what? Negative elasticity. Here you can say it's a substitute good. If your income elasticity of demand was positive 1.2, what would your comment be? If your income elasticity of demand was negative 1.2, what would your comment be?
Inferior good.
The normal good, if it's a positive, then negative. Inferior good. Okay. The point at which demand meets supply is called what?
Equilibrium.
Equilibrium. What are some of the factors that affect supply?
Demand.
No.
The price of other related goods.
Yes, price of related goods, correct?
Technology,
Technology,
price of input,
correct?
government
Where-
regulation,
The weather, technology, exactly. All those are
Cost of production.
what is defined by the consumer surplus, producer surplus, and total surplus? Define consumer surplus. Producer surplus and total surplus. So consumer surplus is simply excess that consumers are willing to pay for above the equilibrium. Producer surplus is simply the benefit that the producer is able to pay below the acceptable price. For instance, if the equilibrium is 20 kwacha, if the consumer says I can pay 25 kwacha, that is a surplus. The producer can say I can produce at 15 kwacha, that is a surplus. All right, total surplus is the summation of what? The consumer and the producer surplus. So there are also government interventions that we have called taxes and subsidies. What are they? What happens when there's tax? What happens when there's subsidy? All right. So these are some of the things that I need you to read through on your own. So at the next class we're going to have, we now get serious into business. So consumer surplus is a measure of economic benefit or value that a consumer receives when they purchase a good at a price lower than the maximum price they're willing to pay. It represents a difference between the price consumers are willing to pay for the product and the actual that they pay. So mathematically, is the area under a triangle. Producer surplus is a measure of economic benefit or profit producers will receive when they sell a good at a higher than the maximum and they're willing to accept. It represents a difference between the price the producers are receiving and the actual cost of producing it. So basically, this is our introduction class. Unless there are any questions.